Come one, come all to the After Dark Podcast. The podcast in which Sheriff Anthony does his best to wrangle Konrad through Westworld, one doggone episode at a time. So kick back and grab yourself some Apple Jack, or some Adam's Ale if that's your preferred poison, and get ready for these two wannabe cowboys to ramble the night away. Music was provided by the fantastic Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot. Enjoy the show!
Down at the road.
Hello and welcome to the Afterlife Podcast. My name is Anthony James and that's Konrad.
Howdy, hello.
Howdy, hello, Konrad. How are you this week?
I'm very well. I've decided to bridge the cultural gap between us here in the UK and our friends in America by responding with a hello in both cultures.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait till we do 1899 and you're going to be making, what do you say, bon voyage? No, what would you say as a sailor?
Avast.
Yeah.
Ahoy and avast.
Ahoy. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. All right. Okay. So this week we are in the lucky position to have an episode of Westworld without any Lee Sizemore.
Oh, it's like a breath of fresh air. I'll tell you what, like England are in the European Championship final and Westworld doesn't have any Lee Sizemore in it. I could not ask for a better week.
Yeah. This week is it's a fantastic week.
Yep.
If anyone didn't know, this week we are going to be covering Akira on the Best Movie Podcast Ever. I don't usually try and cross streams, but I haven't seen it before. Konrad has, and he says that it might have similar themes to things we've covered on the channel before.
Yeah, lots of issues of like it's kind of it's sci-fi, weird cyber magic-y kind of stuff. Like when technology becomes indistinguishable from magics, it's so advanced. That kind of thing.
That sounds right up my alley, so I'm going to watch that tonight. So look out for our thoughts on that next Friday. Right, now though, we're going to get into Westworld. What do you think, Konrad?
I believe we should do it.
Oh, let's break it down!
I said we have no Lee Sizemore this week. What we do have is another Bernard and Dolores scene where they're talking in the little basement-y place, it looks like.
Yes.
So, any thoughts coming out of this opening, Konrad?
Well, so there's one thing I did actually want to say, which isn't to do with this scene, but it is to do with a certain credit that we got before this that I wanted to make mention of. Fucking Neil Marshall, the director of Dog Soldiers and The Descent and some Game of Thrones episodes, directed this episode of Westworld. Which
Makes sense.
I was like, holy shit, Neil Marshall. And funnily enough, I also realized that Ramin Djawadi, who did the score for Game of Thrones, does the score for Westworld as well, which makes me immediately just be like, oh, okay, this guy's amazing. Like the score for Game of Thrones is great, and then the score for Westworld so far is great. Yeah. But I wanted to make mention of that because Neil Marshall is a great director, and it immediately put me on not on edge. What's the word? It just made me excited for this episode.
Yeah. On the edge of your seat.
Yeah. So Bernard and Dolores meeting here. He gives Dolores a copy of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Mm-hmm. I feel like perhaps Dolores' outfit is designed to reflect that, perhaps, given she's wearing a blue and white dress.
Yeah. Well, they did say they had other books in the past, so maybe it's just like a little wink at the camera, maybe.
Yes, yeah.
You mean the costume designers of the show? Yeah, not the costume designers of Westworld.
No, no. Well, I mean, maybe both. It could be. It's a meta joke. Yeah. And we get a weird line when they're having their usual kind of shady conversation where Bernard is asking questions that he perhaps shouldn't be asking. When Dolores asks him where his son is, and Bernard responds, nowhere that you would understand, which by the end of the episode does make sense, but what makes sense for a different reason than why I thought it made sense at the time.
What did you think it meant?
At the time, I was like, well, they're definitely in space because if it was just like, oh, he's with his mum in another city, like Dolores probably understands the concept of cities. Like you could be like, oh, he's in California.
Lots of people there, yeah.
Yeah, like she would understand that presumably, but by the end of it, it's like, oh, okay. It actually, funnily enough, when we find out what happens to Bernard's son, it makes this comment a lot more interesting because it implies certain things about the host's sense of consciousness and like their place in a more kind of cosmic scheme of things, and basically implies that they can't possibly understand the idea of an afterlife or, you know, a god, which I don't necessarily agree with in the context of this show, I don't think.
Yeah, so okay, that's interesting. So when I first heard that, my brain immediately went to just doesn't understand the concept of death in general.
It could be death, yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, but actually, not even on an emotional level, but on like a factual level, they sort of probably do understand what death is because it does happen to them a lot.
Some more than others.
Or they believe it happens to them a lot, you know what I mean?
Teddy's 3 for 3 in this episode, or actually 4 for 3 in this episode.
yeah. Teddy, oh geez. But yeah, so it's interesting that your brain went to afterlife there.
Well, it's because of all like the voice of God stuff that we get later in the episode. This idea of the hosts being, and it's a recurring theme in this episode, to be honest, and in fact in this season so far. But this idea that the hosts are programmed to hear the voice of God, but they're not like they can't possibly understand what that actually means.
We go to the next scene with Dolores waking up again. So if you talk about Teddy dying all the time, well, every episode you can mark your bingo card there. Dolores has woken up in her bed.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that actually. So is the implication, because we see in this scene the Man in Black, by the end of this scene, the Man in Black doing something similar to Dolores, that or it's implied he's doing something similar to her, or has done something similar to her, as he did to Maeve in the flashback that Maeve was experiencing in the previous episode. We see him kind of advancing on her with his big Bowie knife to, you know, do something horrible. Yeah. Oh, so you've played knifey spoony before. So I guess it's implied she's dying then and coming back with each day. Or am I misinterpreting that? Is she just waking up in the same loop?
I think that's the start of her character loop.
Okay.
Whether she dies or not, I think that's just the start of her character loop. Like, obviously, if she dies, she'll have to reset her loop. But also, if she like sees out the day and no newcomer has talked to her or anything, then it would probably start her loop again anyway.
Okay.
Or every 2 days. I don't know how long it takes them to reset the machines, you know. So, but yeah, it seems that that's the start of her character loop. She wakes up and then she goes about her day, and that's when things could happen to her, you know?
Yeah, that's when someone will pick up her tin of peaches and offer assistance or not, as the case may be. As we find out in this episode, 2 of the most unimaginative visitors being like, I'll tell you who I want to get in with, and that's these low-level bandits that we found. But
that's actually
we'll come
what's
back
interesting to me. That's very interesting to me. I want to talk to you about that later on, because those bandits that newcomer guy who's with the bandits, I have some questions about that, to be honest with you, with what happens later in the episode, and I'd love to talk to you about them later.
Yeah.
Or maybe we're talking about a different newcomer.
The guy with the greasy blonde hair who almost gets into a fight with Teddy.
Yeah,
in particular,
that guy.
that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, we'll talk about him later. I've got some thoughts on him and potentially the other. I think there might be other visitors who kind of fall in with that gang as well, or maybe they're hosts. I'm not sure. It's hard to tell sometimes.
Well, there's new storylines happening and stuff, so it's not easy to tell. Also, so later on when I talk about that later on, either you or the audience might have to correct me on it, because maybe I just mistook something. But you'll let me know it later.
Okay.
Anyway, she's woken up. She looks at the gun in her drawer. She dug up out of the garden. The new dad, who's not the original one, lets the cattle out.
Hates painting. He despises painting. This one.
He hates it, but he's good at herding the cattle. Let's say that.
Yeah.
And she seems to remember the Man in Black visiting, as you said. Even though she's been reset since, so she is properly remembering things now. Because the first episode, when the Man in Black visited, it seemed like that was what happened when they went into the shed. You know what I mean? When he dragged her away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it kind of goes back to what I was saying previously about it seeming to be something to do with trauma, unlocking memories, or maybe it's just what he actually does to them with the knife. is like affecting something mechanical in them that unlocks these memories. But certainly, the Man in Black seems to have found a way to give these hosts that he is targeting or has targeted access to their previous memories and storylines as a means of, to quote Ford from later in this episode, bootstrap consciousness, which is a lovely expression that he uses.
Yeah, I thought that was really great as well.
Yeah.
All right, the next scene, our boy William McPoyle is sauntered down the town, white hat on, and
looks like a maths teacher who's just put a cowboy hat on to me. He's got like the kind of tweed jacket and just happens to be wearing a Stetson.
Yeah, he's got that look about him. So basically, he's like watching like a bounty being delivered and then escaping and shooting up, and he finally kills a host. And he just sort of partakes in what Logan wanted him to do.
Yeah. Logan is
so
proud.
What did you think about him taking that step? Did you think it was believable?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that he was shot first keeps it consistent with his character. Like that, even with Clementine under threat, he was unable to bring himself to inflict violence, and could only do it in response to violence being inflicted upon him. So yeah, it's an interesting step for his character. I don't see him suddenly going trigger happy like Logan. But it's I feel like this development for his character, by the end of this scene, we certainly see a kind of new level of assuredness with him basically telling Logan, like, all you want to do is have sex with everything and kill stuff. To which Logan responds like, I'm just waiting for the good storylines to turn up. And William's like, okay, well, you stay here and I'm going to go. He sort of takes charge of his own destiny to a certain extent, when he's like, I'm going to go off and find some trouble to get into while you stay here having the most boring time you could possibly imagine, which is a nice shift in the power dynamic. And we also get it confirmed in this scene that they are in fact going to be brothers-in-law, which was kind of implied, and we discussed it last week, although I would have missed it were it not for you pointing me in the right direction, to be honest.
Well, you would have got there eventually. I just didn't remember we got the confirmation, so that's why I wanted to talk about it last week. If I had known this confirmation was coming, maybe I wouldn't have dug into it as much. But maybe I would have, because I wanted to seem smart. But basically, Logan, I like Logan in this scene because he's just showing himself to. He's not, again, it's sort of the unempathetic nature of him. We talked about last week how he doesn't care. He doesn't really care about the experience of William here. He only cares about his own experience. He just wants to go on. And we also found out it's $40K a day. So
yeah, $40,000 a day. Like, oh my god! Like this book, because this was originally written by Michael Crichton. It put me back in mind of the he's not Richard Hammond. What's his name? John Hammond. We had this conversation in the first episode. John Hammond's dialogue in Jurassic Park, where it's like, I don't want the park to only be for the ultra rich, and the lawyer being like, oh, I'll have a coupon day. $40,000 a day. Who is coming to this apart from the ultra rich? Like, where is there like a government subsidy to get people who aren't billionaires to come to this place, or what?
Because I was thinking of it, like, even if I won the lottery and I was like had £5 million or something, I still wouldn't pay that. Like, if
absolutely
go for
not.
a week, that's nearly $300,000.
Yeah, like you'd have to be like Bezos level rich to even consider doing this, which does. I mean, I think that makes it seem a little bit more insidious than it did already. It's already very clearly, I think, designed to kind of put you on the side of the hosts, as like what they're doing here feels a bit monstrous. But then when you find out it's essentially this playground for the super rich to act out some of their darkest fantasies, it takes on this much darker quality that I don't think it had before.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And also, like, because the amount of newcomers in the park and the visitors in the park, when you compare it to the population of the world, especially considering they're using that word rotate, which implies they're maybe in the future a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, then the population of Earth would have been up as well. So the fact of the matter is, such a small percentage of the world are actually going to this park.
Yeah.
That actually, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that they are all billionaires.
Yeah. Well, and they've said, the popularity of the park is declining. I wonder whether we see, this is just me kind of firing from the hip a little bit here, but I feel like they're going to show us the world outside the park at some point in this series. Maybe not this season, but at some point in this series, because I feel like them saying how much it costs and them saying it's becoming less popular, to me perhaps implies that less and less people are able to afford. I mean, I'm sure there's like an interest thing in it as well, but I think it may actually be expanded to be a reflection of like kind of human society as a whole. Like less and less people can afford to come to this because the wealth gap has gotten bigger, where, you know, the number of people who could actually afford to come to this is becoming smaller and smaller, and everyone else is just incredibly poor and living in whatever nightmarish conditions they've created in this what I assume is the near future on Earth.
Yeah. Okay, it'd be very interesting to see. I will end this little chat here with Ema's take on this scene, because we were watching it last night. Mm-hmm. She said she was always reminded of this saying when in regards to Logan: "You take a monkey to Rome, and all it sees is bananas." You know, so they go to Rome. All they see is bananas. So Logan goes to Westworld. He doesn't see the possibilities. All he sees is prostitutes to have sex with. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the most thoroughly unimaginative thing. Like, you can go and have sex with a prostitute. I'm not speaking from experience. I hasten to add this, but I'm pretty sure you can go and have sex with a prostitute for less than 40 grand a day. Like, it's just, admittedly, you probably can't go kill people for less than 40 grand a day. But it's the life that Logan wants to lead here is just the most unimaginative, boring, and just kind of embarrassingly pathetic vision of what his fantasy life would actually be, and I have no time for this character at all.
Yeah, no, you know, he's a low life, to be honest with you. All right, so Bernard and Teresa having a wee chat.
Yeah, he's not getting much sleep. Wonder why that is. Wonder what he's up to. There's
two things going on, actually. A little bit of bottom bomb, as well as a little bit of talking to Dolores as well.
Yeah, his evenings are booked up at the moment. Old Bernard.
Yeah, he's got two women on the go. He's two-timing. So they're talking about Ford, and Ford's apparently carved out half of the park for his new storyline. And a lot of other storylines are in disarray because of this. As well as that, Teresa wants to know why Bernard his team have been pulling more hosts from the park to do follow-up inspections on their brains and stuff if the issue has been sorted.
It's very I feel like it's a very accurate reflection of what life in like a corporate environment is like, where the different departments don't really know what the other departments are up to, and it comes down to these kind of vaguely threatening conversations between upper management being like, look, like this woman is in security. Presumably, you know, she's in charge. Teresa is presumably in charge of security for the entire park, and she doesn't understand what the narrative people are doing, which is realistic and also incredibly dangerous when you're dealing with, you know, a situation like this, where it's, you know, it's very much like a tinderbox ready to go up if you if things start going south.
You're right, but I don't think that their narrative just to stop the YouTube comment corrections. I think the narrative is Lee Sizemore's group. I think that I can't remember the exact name of theirs.
Oh, it's like emotion or something like that.
Emotionality,
like behavior or something like
that. Behavior.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because the narrative is the scumbag marketing type. So just like, what if Native Americans this time? And it's like, oh, how very original. But yeah. So the fact that Teresa doesn't really know what's going on strikes me as very, on one hand, very believable, and on the other, it's like, wow, that's dangerous for given what you're toying with here. Yes, and we get, I think we get the name Arnold mentioned here. That's right.
It's sort of two scenes in one, isn't it? Because Elsie, then Bernard walks into Elsie, and then Elsie.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
is looking at the videotape of that bandit Walter again.
Yeah.
Almost said Volta there. Walter again. And
Volta. He's like he's like Danish.
I'm thinking of that guy from the UK X Factor a few years ago. Volta. Look him up, guys, if you haven't.
That's a niche reference.
If you want to see the sense of humour of the UK, look up Volta.
I will. I'm sorry. I'm just going to add an addendum to that. To some of the UK, some of us didn't care at all for this particular brand of humor.
But what I mean about the sense of humor is that the fact that they would actually vote for that guy to get so far at a singing competition is ridiculous.
A nightmare situation. But
anyway, Walter, not Volta, is talking. Apparently, looks like he's talking to someone called Arnold. So we've got a name mentioned, a little mysterious name thrown out there. What do you thoughts on that?
So we find out about Arnold later in the episode, and this Walter is having a full-on conversation with someone in his head. Now, so there's a couple of things that are revealed here as well that are maybe slightly less important than the Arnold stuff. The fact that in his rampage he killed everyone he killed had killed him in some previous storyline, which
he let 3 go, and they had never killed him before.
Yeah, which goes back to this idea of someone going around like unlocking these memories that allows them, maybe through traumatic events, maybe through some kind of insidious like form of hacking or something like that. But definitely seems like someone is deliberately unlocking these memories of certain hosts in order to cause these problems. The stuff with Arnold, so I won't discuss what I think happened to Arnold too much now, because obviously it comes back in a big way in the scene between Bernard and Ford. But I think I don't think he's still alive, but I think there may be something to do with Arnold's consciousness being still around somehow, because I don't think, I know later Walter's conversation with Arnold is kind of dismissed as, I can't remember what Ford calls it, it's like cognitive dissonance or something like that. He says he basically just dismisses it, saying, "Oh, he's crazy." Yeah. But I just don't feel like that's the answer. I feel like
cognitive dissonance is when you sort of, on purpose or not on purpose, deny something like a correction to you. It's like, like people who believe in crazy conspiracy theories, and they're showed, well, what about all these scientific reports? And they're like, well, they might not be right, and they just sort of reject them because they have cognitive dissonance to that subject. They only believe that they believe.
Yeah, like someone like my tattoo artist who believes that all scientists are corrupt and employed by Bill Gates. Do you see how much scientists earn? They wouldn't be doing it if they were going to be corrupt.
I've got a Bachelor of Science. I'm technically a mathematician, scientist.
What do you know about CRISPR? Tell me about the Pfizer vaccine.
I need to get Bill Gates on the phone. I'm telling you.
Yeah, you're missing out.
Maybe I could go to Westworld.
Maybe. Would you want to, though? That's the question. I don't know how this ends, but I'm assuming not well. So, but yeah. So I can't remember what Ford says, but he basically just hand waves this at some point later in the episode, and is like, "Oh, he's just crazy. He's not. This is just him talking to the voices in his head." But which I guess to a certain extent I do agree with. But I feel like the voice is there, which makes me think, like, if they can. Basically got this episode started to get me thinking about what the extent to which they could represent a consciousness of another living person or something along those lines, and how could use that to speak to people. So obviously, they're creating these personalities. I think they said, like, Elsie says later in this episode, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but Elsie says later in this episode that they base the entire personality around like experiences and then kind of build out from there. So that's like the root of the character. So in my head, there's no real reason why you couldn't take the consciousness of an actual person and build that into a host. And maybe that's what Walter is talking to here, like the kind of consciousness of Arnold that is stored somewhere else and is able to communicate with him. I'm not sure how, but I feel like the fact he's speaking to Arnold to me implies that Arnold is still around in some form.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's cool. I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about that more. You said you have more on that later?
Well, yeah, when we get into the Ford and Bernard stuff.
Bernard, not now Bernard. So next scene, Teddy is escorting a female guest.
Yep. She's kind of a badass. I think this is a classic. Cool. Set up a badass so that when she gets shit scared later in the episode, it's like, wow, this is a really scary. this is a really scary storyline that they're in.
Yeah, exactly. Teddy walks in with her. She gets taken off by Clementine. And then, what do you call it? Maeve is looking into Teddy's eyes.
Yeah.
And Maeve isn't in this episode very much, but you get that reminder that this is what's going on, and she's getting reminded of the past.
Yeah.
She's also, when she sees Teddy, she remembers him. Well, I'm gonna call backstage from now on. Okay.
Okay. So I think that's a fair term for it.
So she remembers Teddy backstage in the case with all the bodies, dead.
Yeah.
And that's obviously ticking away in Maeve's brain. So something's going on there. So I don't. Teddy then sees Dolores obviously outside the window.
And we have like we have like this kind of return to the very stereotypical but the very well acted dialogue between them that just feels crueler and crueler the longer it goes on. Because and it does kind of beg the question. It's an interesting thing to keep returning to, because it does beg the question, like, how much of this emotional connection is real between them? Like, is any of it real between them, or is it all? I mean, obviously it's all kind of pre-written, but it provokes very interesting thoughts in me of just like, this feels genuine to me, but do I even know what a genuine connection looks like, or am I just being fooled by the complexity of the kind of narratives and the character arcs that these hosts have? And
it also follows like connection and emotional connection to people. Is that only possible with a human style consciousness? There's a lot of people who think they're connected to certain animals. Are those animals even more advanced than these hosts? Like the line between all these things is what gets brought into discussion here, and it's really, really interesting. And I know exactly what you mean, because you do feel, even though you know they're hosts, you feel that there is a connection between Dolores and Teddy somehow, even though it's been written that way. You feel like they belong together,
Yeah, well, I mean, and we know that by the end of this episode, Dolores is to some extent self-aware and is being instructed by Bernard to stay on loop. Mm-hmm. So it's not inconceivable that she's just doing this. She's going through the motions of this storyline because that's what she's been instructed to do. But at the same time, the fact that she is slightly self-aware and is able to remain this committed to her arc with Teddy makes me wonder whether there is some kind of connection between them outside of the arc that's defined for them. I think the last thing I will say on this as well is that the fact that we cut from the Teddy rushing off to the ranch to save the day, or not, as the case may be, to him sat naked in the backstage environment talking to Ford about the new the new narrative makes me think, has Teddy died again? Did he die twice? Does he die twice in this episode?
I don't know, actually. Maybe they just brought him in, but
I want to count that. I feel like, because the last time we see him, he's rushing off towards a gunfight, and then he's backstage. It's like, I think Teddy died again, which is so. What that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That'd be 6 deaths in 3 episodes. We're at now by the end of this episode for Teddy.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're counting, because I'm not counting.
I'm keeping count because it's unreal how many times his character dies in this.
Before they go into the Ford scene, though, they do show some really lovely shots of an eye getting knitted together.
Oh yeah, unbelievable! The wide shot is kind of uncomfortable though. Like the idea of like a little needle like puncturing an eyeball then pumping it full of white goop is a bit uncomfortable. But yeah, when it zooms in and it's all kind of like threaded together by nanomachines or whatever's doing it, it is pretty stunning to look at.
Yeah, it's lovely. Okay, so Ford is talking to Teddy, and he's talking to him about like this mysterious backstory that he's always had, and Teddy's sort of sitting there with a real steely look on his face.
Yeah, like, and they're just like, the reason your backstory is mysterious is because we could never be bothered to write you one. Which I feel like that's a shot across the bow of like 80% of all westerns. It's just like, like The Man with No Name. I don't actually think that. I'm pretty sure they never. He was in he fought in the Civil War as well. Like Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I've seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But I think eventually they do flesh it out. But I feel like in the earlier Dollars trilogy, he had no backstory at all. He was just this mysterious gunslinger who turns up and is a badass and is a bit violent. And
100% a take, like a mention of westerns there, like referring to that 100%.
Yeah, the mysterious gunslinger who is mysterious because they just couldn't be bothered. I don't know. He has some vague trauma.
It's not essential to the plot, so therefore we don't talk about it. You know?
Yeah, he just needs to be taciturn. That's all we need. You need him to be grim-looking and hardened by a life that we're not going to expand on at any point.
But it makes sense as well because it's like they're actually doing like a Western tropey thing too. Is because later, like if you have the Dollars trilogy or whatever, as you go through the films, it's like. Yeah. All right, where are we going to put more stories in? It's like,
you can fill this blank in if you want to.
Fill this backstory in. So that's what they're going to do. And they're filling this backstory in with a new character called Wyatt.
Yeah.
And I love every time Teddy starts talking about Wyatt, he's like, he was an army man, and and he came back with some crazy ideas.
Yeah, it's all still really vague.
Yeah.
It's a weird storyline. It's kind of, I said in the last episode that I thought this new narrative was going to feature some weird kind of supernatural stuff, and I feel like we are getting close to that with what we see in this episode. But it's also, it's just an odd narrative. Like I don't really understand what the deal with Wyatt is. I'm interested to see it, certainly. But it's another great example, to be honest, of them having these just kind of Western narratives going on that are really kind of like competently written and delivered, while the much more high concept stuff is happening in the background, or sometimes in the foreground as well, to be honest. So yeah, I'm interested in the Wyatt storyline as well as what it means for the kind of day-to-day functioning of the park and the hosts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. I'm looking forward to seeing. Obviously, the show is 3 series long so far, and season 4 is coming out next year. So that sort of balance that they're striking at the minute isn't going to continue in the same vein, obviously, as we go through the show. So, and maybe that contributes a little bit to why people sort of are a bit down on the 2nd and 3rd season, because like this basically there's only so long you can do what you're doing right now, because eventually these characters have to come to conclusions. You know?
Yeah, I'm 100% certain that they are leaving the park at some point in this show. There's just no way they don't do that, because that's the very natural. If I were writing this show in my head, it would be like, well, what do we do with the 2nd and 3rd seasons? Like, well, we take all these well-established host characters who develop self-awareness, and then we take them out of the park and put them into an even more unfamiliar situation. Like, that's, I think, where the show is going to go. And that's going to be difficult for them to manage because, as you say, I think one of the things I really love about this show is the way they mesh those traditional kind of genre-based narratives with these kind of broader questions of identity and self and id and all these kind of like highfalutin ideas, which I'm sure they'll keep asking as the show goes on. But I will miss the narratives when they inevitably go.
Yeah, the genre coat of paint, so to speak, is it's great. I nearly said paint a coat there. All right,
you could paint a coat if you wanted to.
You could. Actually, you could. Never thought of that. You could.
I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a couple of days ago, and they literally do paint a coat for Leonardo DiCaprio's character in that. Like they say it's tan, and then they dye it dark brown. So.
Well, that's literally my wife's job. So
well, there you go.
Her job is literally to paint clothes to make them look like costumes.
Well, there you go. It's not a foolish statement at all. Then nailed it.
Actually, I don't know if I mentioned this before. Now that we're now talking about it, because I think the listeners were really interested in this. My wife's job one day of Game of Thrones. She was working on Game of Thrones, season 8, and there's a scene in there where Jorah Mormont gets really battered up. Let's say really battered, right? Let's just say not go any further than that.
Yeah.
And he's covered in blood and mud and everything like this. And my wife was given his armor in the morning and said, we need this in 5 hours or whatever. It needs to look brand new because we're shooting a previous scene later. So Eva had to take it from like blood and guts and mud and turn it back into brand new. Like that's one of the things she does.
Yeah, it's super cool. I love hearing stuff like that. I did, for the listeners at home who may be disappointed, I did ask Anthony's wife to try and get me a Valyrian steel sword. But unfortunately, it turns out they keep those things pretty well guarded.
Locked up. They keep them locked up. Although I did get to sit on the Iron Throne in the actual Great Hall set, so that was good.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yep. Okay, sorry, enough bragging. Let's get on with it. So now it's Dolores' turn to walk down Main Street,
And here we go.
Yeah, here he is.
Captain Shitstain out here. Like, imagine paying 40 grand a day to hang out with these guys. I can, as I said in the previous episode, I can understand the people who come here to live out their their kind of masochistic fantasies. Like, they want to inflict pain, they want to kill. I totally believe that, there are people who go, to shoot, they pay huge amounts of money to go and shoot like lions and shit like that, those kind of people are out there, and I 100% believe those kind of people would pay that money to come here and shoot hosts or do whatever cruel shit they want to do deep in their hearts. But the idea that you come here to be like, I'm going to be a bad guy and I'm going to go kill some people, and this is the group that you fall in with, like these low-level, killed by James Bond in the first scene motherfuckers. These guys aren't making it to the end of the movie, guys. Like, you've picked the wrong gang. Like, there's literally like that cool I've forgotten his name now. Is it Javier, the like Hispanic?
Oh yes, I can't remember his name. I can't remember. Yeah,
Hector. But Hector, that's it. Yeah, but you've got these cool bandits out there. It's like, that's the gang you want to get in with. Those are the cool guys. Like, not these jabronis. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, why?
40 grand a day.
It was going to be easy. I thought you said it was going to be easy.
Oh my, yeah, and then he turns down the gunfight with Teddy. Like, you literally can't die. Like, and it's interesting actually when he says, like, when Teddy kind of squares up to him and he says, I thought I wanted something easy.
Yeah.
It to me, it's almost like kind of an interesting reflection or inversion, I suppose, of William's character, where it's someone who has an idea of what he wants to be in this world, but he doesn't quite have the courage or conviction to do it. And in William's case, I think it's that he does want that sense of adventure. He does want to go out and kind of have an exciting time, but he's not mad about the idea of killing people or inflicting pain. And this guy, he wants to be a bad guy.
Mad about the idea in the fact that he doesn't want to do it, yeah?
Yeah, but he doesn't actually want to get
the international audience is like, why would he be mad about it? Like,
oh yeah. Yeah, like he is enthusiastic about the idea of doing it. But yeah, so this guy wants to be a bad guy, but he's actually too cowardly to just do it. Like he needs some push. Like, even when he literally can't lose the fight, he still needs a little bit of nudging to become who he really is, as we've heard said of the park before, to kind of reveal his innermost desires, which are fucking horrific for this guy, to be honest.
Yeah, well, what we see later on. So basically, so Teddy squares up to him. Dolores is apparently hard. That made me think, actually, it makes sense. So for these guys who are coming just to, sleep with women, it does make sense to view Dolores as hard mode. Like, obviously, I don't know. I think most people who come to this park are not going to, want to force themselves on the women. I think that
there are plenty of opportunities to have sexual encounters with very eager hosts, in the brothel or probably elsewhere.
But some of them obviously will, So my thought then was that, if you look at it like that, like, Dolores is sort of sitting there, and Ford even mentions it about Teddy. Like, Teddy's there to have someone wants to have their way with the farmers. So she's almost there as a sort of lure for RAPE. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, that's why I hate this character. I mean, I'm sure he's not an important character, but it reminds me. I won't talk too much about it because I don't want to go back to old shows. But it reminds me of the scene in Dark where Ellie, as a young teenager, with the guy in the caravan with Ellie, and he sits down, starts eating her food, and you can see the cogs turning in that character's brain where he decides that he's going to attempt to force himself on her. It's not an immediate thing. It's not initially a violent thing, and in in those few moments with that character, you can almost see him rationalizing to himself, like, I'm not a bad guy. It's and kind of lying to himself about what he wants to do and rationalizing it to the point where he can kind of morally forgive himself for it. And I feel like this character is very similar to that, where he wants to violently assault a woman, like, coming here, but he needs to reconcile that desire with how he views himself as a person. And I think it's a really, really strong performance. I think it's really I think it's really well realized, and it is horrific. Like, this is one of the most horrific characters we've seen in the show so far, I think. And just the way he's performed as this kind of like cowardly, like hiding behind these bandits kind of guy. It's really effective, and I absolutely hated this guy from the moment I saw him.
Yeah, I did as well. It speaks a lot as well, like his choice of clothes and his slicked hair and everything. Like, it does speak a lot to him as well. Real slime ball.
Yeah.
All right, so Elsie and who I've called in my notes Thor, because I can never remember the character's name.
Oh, what, Security Man?
Security Man.
Yeah.
Yep. Scatty Security Man. So they're talking about a guy who's they're sort of,
the woodcutter's gone missing.
Woodcutter's gone missing, so they go up to this group of people around a campsite, and they're just like, they've been on a loop for days.
They're just arguing about who should cut the wood, which is great. I love that idea, that they're just like, they can't do anything because they're programmed to like. Well, I mean, it's cool that they're not. That this idea of weapon handling privileges are limited, so they literally can't touch the axe. But the way it's like narratively delivered, where they've just been like, "I'll pitch this tent," just there's like 8 people there. Like, they can't have all done something. Like, someone didn't do anything in pitching this camp. So,
oh my god, it was so funny. I think that they mentioned as well, like the scope of these storylines and how long they take to happen is really cool, because they mentioned that they were meant to arrive in town in 2 days.
Yeah, for a cattle drive or something, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It was so crazy. But yeah, so they're sitting around arguing because no one can touch the axe. They go into the tent. Elsie goes in and she sees a load of carved animals and carved things. And she takes one.
Yeah, one that looks suspiciously like a constellation.
Yeah, what was it that Thor said? He said it was like Orion. It was Orion's belt, and she was like, "Who are you, fucking Copernicus?" No, what did you say?
No, she said, "What are you, Gala-fucking-Leo?" Which I was like, that's a great line.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
I have to say, actually, I enjoyed this little section for these two characters, because we haven't really got. I mean, we don't really find out that much about them, but it's nice to just get a little kind of moment with them to, see a little bit more of them, because we haven't. Well, I suppose we've had a fair bit of Elsie, but Security Guy, we've had nothing. He basically he almost shot Ford in like the first episode, and that's basically all we've seen of
Doesn't
him.
Trust the hosts at all. That's the thing.
Yeah, and by the end of this episode, to be honest, justifiably so.
Yeah, it seems that way anyway. Okay, so Teddy, he's talking to the bounty hunters because they come along. So the newcomer, the woman who's with the bounty hunter guy who was glitching out in the other episode, they come along and say to Teddy, "Right, Teddy, we got to go. Wyatt's close by." I love the fact as well that this newcomer woman, she knows where to find Teddy. Like, she's like, "Oh, I was up with Clementine there. Obviously, I let Teddy continue his loop, so I'm gonna have to go get him." So she knows exactly where he is. So basically, then Teddy starts talking about Wyatt because Dolores is like, "Who's Wyatt?" And he's like, "Came back with some strange ideas."
Yeah, that kind of like stares off into the middle distance, just like, man's pure evil.
Yeah.
It's great. I love how it kind of, it does play with the Western idea of these kind of storylines. Like, it's definitely poking fun at itself, I think, with this storyline.
Yeah, and every time they mention, like, the line itself of describing the Wyatt character is so cool and so of a Western.
Yeah.
Every time, like, from whenever he said it when Ford was programming him to when he says it now, and when he says it like 3 or 4 times, every time it's funnier and funnier.
Yeah,
every time he says it.
It's great. It's so false, but also works so well that it's really, really good stuff.
Yep. So they go off. They find people hung up on a tree.
Yeah. I've seen aliens. I know a corpse that's not actually a corpse when I see one, and this was very gross, and it's a really interesting tonal shift actually for the end of this episode. Like, it definitely gets really dark, both literally and kind of tonally, in a way that the show hasn't really, and I was very into it.
Yeah, it was doing really well. So basically, it was actually the two storylines were getting dark too. The sort of Wyatt storyline and as well the Elsie one. So basically, one of them wakes up, as you say, so it's not dead. Seems to spit something. I think probably just like blood or something from inside.
Yeah, I thought it was just blood. Maybe it was something else, but
yeah. So and then there's like a shootout.
Yes.
And there's a couple of newcomers.
The other newcomers just like, fuck this, I'm going.
Yeah, why are we here? Like, what are we doing? Let's get out of here.
I think it's quite believable. I think I like in this situation. Like, this is probably. I think this is probably in this. If I were in Westworld, this is probably the kind of storyline I'd want to get into. Because I'm like, I want to be a cool gunslinger who goes and hunts down bad guys. And then I'd get into it, and I'd be like, fuck this is scary. I'm going home.
I'm going to go paint the mountains. I'm
going to go find some gold with that weird one-eyed prospector man.
Standing at the bar. Hey there.
Hello, friend. Yeah.
Remember earlier I fell off the wagon?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be funny. Okay, so... next scene, then we'll come back to sort of all that action later on. This is a big scene.
Boy,
Ford
howdy.
And Bernard. Yeah, Ford and Bernard are talking about all sorts of things.
Yes.
Ford's chasing inspiration. Why? Also, there was a moment where Ford like ripped a blanket off a host.
Yeah, like he really laid into one of the I don't know whether it was the behavior or whatever, but yeah, this Ford definitely has a bit of a character turn here where he's like insisting that the hosts are unfeeling and literally cutting one's face. It's like, oh wow, Ford has come across as kind of an idealistic dreamer to me, I think, up until this point, like a very measured kind of character, and this felt
a little bit of cynicism coming in. Yeah,
felt like a real turn for him to see his disregard for the individualism. Particularly, it's funny actually, given how he's talked to Bernard previously about, this update that makes these little kind of quirks appear, and how, the mistake is the foundation of all sentient life on this planet, essentially, and how he was kind of in search of that. This idea that like they're not individuals, they don't feel anything unless we tell them to, is a really, really stark turn. I don't know how not how I feel about it. I think it was brilliantly portrayed, but I don't know what it means for Ford's character quite yet. But it's definitely a change.
Well, what I thought when I saw this was he started talking very quickly about this Arnold character who was apparently his partner.
Yep.
And that made me start thinking that, okay, so everything we've seen Ford to be so far was actually sort of him and Arnold together. Whereas now we're seeing what role Ford played within the partnership. You know what I mean? Potentially.
Yeah. It could be, actually. Yeah, that could be the case. I mean, the first mention of Arnold as a business partner in this scene, I started thinking of the Man in Black. Obviously, I thought he was Tommy in the last episode. I still think he's Tommy, but I did start thinking, oh, maybe Arnold is the Man in Black. But then we actually see a picture.
Remind us of the Tommy thing, just in case anyone didn't hear.
Young Ford, the host of Young Ford, kind of wandering around in the desert, mentioned a character called Tommy, and the Man in Black seems to be of a similar age to Ford, which when young Ford is talking about a Tommy who's either a brother or a friend or something, and the way the Man in Black kind of knows the park so well, it does make me think that maybe they were friends or brothers, even though their accents are obviously wrong, that had some kind of falling out and now kind of work on opposite sides of the park situation. But yeah, so I still think the Man in Black is Tommy, because we see a picture of Arnold later in this episode and it doesn't look like the Man in Black, really. So, okay, I've got some thoughts about this. Okay. So, first off, while it is still creepy and falls into the uncanny valley, the CGI face of young Anthony Hopkins in this is far better than any of the CGI faces they did in Star Wars, which I don't understand how a television show manages to look better than the Star Wars movies where they did Peter Cushing and
yeah, I know. I think probably, to be honest with you, I think probably what they did is I don't know exactly what they did, but I assume they went for the cheapest option, which would be what's that face thing you can do? What's it called? Deep fakes.
Deep fakes. Yeah. So I think
what I've seen on the internet every time like Disney does something with Star Wars and like does like Luke Skywalker's face and stuff really young, every time they do it, within a week someone puts up a way better one made from deepfakes. So when I saw it, I thought it was really good as well. So I just assumed because it looks so good, it must be deepfakes. Like, you know, that's how I sort of...
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know that much about the technology that goes into it. I just know that when I saw this, I was like, I'm still getting Uncanny Valley vibes from this, but it's notable that I'm getting far less than I did from something like Rogue One, which came after this and is a massive budget movie, as opposed to... I mean, HBO obviously have a lot of money for this, but they don't have Star Wars money for it. So it was
a very quick.
It was,
quick
yeah.
Shot
It's a very quick scene. Maybe if he'd have had to ambulate a bit more, the strings would have showed. But so we get a lot of interesting kind of AI talk here. So we're talking the Turing test gets a mention, obviously. So that's, you know, the kind of gold standard for robots passing as people, or at least it was. I don't know if it still is. And then this idea of this like triangle of kind of self-actualization with like memory,
pyramid of consciousness.
Pyramid of consciousness. That's it. Yeah, with memory, improvisation, self-interest, and then question mark at the top.
Question mark.
Yeah. And this idea, the voice commands are interpreted by the host as the voice of God, and how that was like a really big part of their initial programming, with this idea that if the hosts interpreted the voice commands they were hearing as the voice of God, their own internal programming would take over and begin to fill in the blanks between kind of how they view themselves and what they are hearing as commands to form the final stage of consciousness, which doesn't sound like it worked. But it's interesting that those kind of vestiges still exist with these, you know, voice commands that are being issued to the hosts occasionally with the, I've forgotten what it is now, may you dream in a deep and pleasant slumber.
Sleep. Yeah.
But yeah, so certainly interesting that is still around. Then we find out that Arnold died in the park, and I feel like the show is very clearly hinting at suicide when Bernard asks how he died, and Anthony Hopkins says it was ruled as an accident, but I knew Arnold and he was very, very careful. But I interpret that as I think a host killed him. That's what I think happened. Okay. I don't think it was a suicide. I think a host killed him. And then we get something interesting here at the end of this, with Ford basically being concerned that Bernard is going to make the same mistakes as Arnold, because his son has died, and I guess Ford fears that he's kind of seeking a deeper meaning to life in the hosts, seeking some kind of, I don't know, answers to the pain that he experienced when his son died. It felt like a bit of a leap to me here, which makes me think that maybe Ford is kind of aware of what Bernard is doing with Dolores and with the hosts to some extent.
Yeah, because how would he sort of... He had to have a basis for that assumption.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a jump for me. I was like, does he know about what he's doing, and he's just kind of letting him do it? So that's kind of where I am with that at the moment. But yeah, holy hell, a lot of stuff about the kind of origins of the park and the design of the hosts in this scene. Yeah,
and it was really cool. I like whenever they go through all this like science mumbo jumbo and stuff. Like,
yeah,
some shows will lose you there, but they really do keep you on the edge of your seat. Like, also this discussion of consciousness and stuff, it's very sort of very new in a way. Like, I'm sure it's been happening for years, but for me and in my own personal life, I haven't seen much shows where they delve into the idea of robotic consciousness so much as this, you know?
No, and it's an interesting subject to explore as well, because I think it's really easy to become very like kind of play or address things that are very played out. So obviously, like, you know, you've got stuff like Blade Runner, or, you know, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, if you want to talk about the novel, where that asks a lot of really interesting questions, but often these kind of identity, the questions of identity around robots and AI boils down to, what if robots are real people too, and humans are the monsters? And that question has been asked and done poorly so many times that I think it's really nice to watch a show that's not just not dealing in these kind of like really broad strokes of and like is asking deeper questions about who is a host, who is like a real person. What does it even mean to be alive? And to be honest, like when I was watching this scene, I was like, okay, so it could be that this idea of like trying to find consciousness, like or trying to find the sort of key to consciousness. It does make me wonder if the hosts are like limited to actually individuals in the park, or whether there's like hosts wandering around as well. Because we kind of know, I don't know, the I've forgotten her name now, the character who dressed William. Like, I think it's implied that she was a host, and that's like that's a character who is aware that they're not in the park. Which makes me think, are there other characters who are maybe hosts in this?
Yeah, also like interesting actually, because most hosts, except for that one, really have been told, like, they're sort of programmed to avoid the concept of a host.
Yeah.
And whenever they're questioned about it, like Dolores, she just goes, better getting home, it's getting dark.
Yeah, like they literally will just like completely avoid the question.
Yeah, whereas this woman who we assumed was a host just said, like, why does it matter and stuff. Like, so she was actually engaging in the conversation of what a host is, which actually it could lead down one or two ways. One, either this, like, they don't really need to have that barrier there, they could actually have it and safely have it, or the other way could be maybe she actually was a real person. Who knows? Yeah,
I mean, she could have been a real person, and maybe that's just, that whole scene is just designed to kind of blur the lines between a host and a real person in the viewer's eyes. But if she is a host, then it does, in light of this, pyramid of consciousness, it makes me wonder whether maybe they are experimenting or have experimented with the idea of, like, achieving that final level of consciousness requires them to take an active part in the creation of consciousness of other hosts. So you make hosts conscious by involving them in this, like, circle of life, I guess. Which, if that turns out to be the case, proposes all kinds of interesting questions for who's doing what and for what reason in this park, to be honest.
Next up, we get Bernard talking to who we can assume is his ex-partner about his child. We find out that his child is... Did we get confirmation that he's dead, or is it just presumed dead?
Yeah. Like, at the end of the previous scene, Ford says, "I know that." I can't remember exactly what he says, but it's like, since the death of your son Charlie is what Ford says. I think you've been thinking about him a lot, or something
weighs
like that.
Heavily on you, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and then we get Gina Torres from Firefly turning up as Bernard's wife / ex, I'm assuming. I don't actually know what his marital status is.
Yeah, well, he's away from her at the minute anyway. Maybe he needs to rotate back.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of emotional moment for these two characters to now we've just found out that his son is dead. I don't think we find out how he died, and then getting these two reminiscing about their relationship with him, which it's just a nice emotional moment for them, I think.
Yeah, I like the last line of the scene. I think struck really hard with me, and it was like Bernard saying that the pain is all I have left of him. I thought that was very
and I think that's
nice.
It's very believable, and totally the kind of thing that I could see breaking up a relationship as well. I don't know whether Bernard's infidelities predate his son's death, but certainly the loss of a child, I could 100% imagine that the pain of that would just cause rifts that you couldn't possibly imagine in a relationship.
Yeah, see, that's maybe why I assumed that it was his ex-partner at this point, because of him being with Teresa, and I'm just like, come on, Bernard, you wouldn't be like that, would you? But no.
I mean, it could be. Yeah, I think my assumption is they're ex-partners as well. But he certainly doesn't seem to wear a wedding ring, so they're not. They're living in sin if they are.
And rightfully so. All right, so Elsie and Thor back at it again.
Nighttime spooky bits.
Yep. So I think they find him in a pit. He's in a weird pit. He was vectoring, as they say.
He's in a crevasse.
People don't know maths. Vectors are literally just a sort of a force in a direction. And there's walking in a direction, right? He's walking the whole way to the edge of the map, an X and a Y coordinate. And he fell in a pit because it was on the vector that he was taking. And we could just finish this storyline here if you want. Some crazy stuff happens.
Well, they definitely deliberately make him out to be a zombie in this. He very much feels like a zombie in this. And then maybe you can shed some light on this. But this is the second time we've seen a host rough up another person. In the case, this one's slightly crazier, but when the Man in Black went to that town in, I think it's a kind of New Mexico equivalent, and he gets jumped by someone who one of the hosts kind of physically attacks him, which makes me think, maybe within reason they are allowed to kind of wrestle with the visitors, as long as they're not doing them real physical harm. But it does make me wonder how far their core programming to, never hurt another individual actually extends, if they're allowed to do that. And then obviously here we see this host overcome sleep mode. The second host we've seen overcome sleep mode in 2 episodes, and kind of attack the security guy, and then look like he's about to attack Elsie before bashing his own head in with a rock, which is very graphic and wet sounding.
I think it was played in this to be so serious that I don't think that this was in the general realm of a host being able to rough up someone like the Man in Black. I think that this very much played the way he attacked the security guy was really over the line. This wasn't supposed to happen. Which is interesting, because not only now are they able to overcome sleep mode and stuff like that, they're also maybe defying that line of code, which is what the security guy was talking about, is the only thing keeping them from attacking them.
Which is seems his skepticism seems more and more justified as each episode goes on, to be honest.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so that's a weird thing. We'll see where that goes in the future of the show. We'll sort of turn our attentions now, I suppose, to the Teddy Wyatt situation.
So we know he's only got a little part in this narrative. Also, count it, folks. This is the sixth. This is the 6th time that Teddy has died in 3 episodes, I believe. So he died. Yeah, he's died twice in 2 episodes, and then one in the first and once in the third. So 6 times overall in 3 episodes, which must be some kind of record, I think. But so these guys don't die when they're shot, which seems odd. I wonder. I don't really know what this narrative is going to be. It's a really odd narrative. And they're all wearing. They're wearing the flesh of their enemies and stuff. So there's definitely some. It put me in mind actually a little bit of what was that movie called? Bone Tomahawk, the Kurt Russell western that came out a few years ago, where they basically are fighting. I think they're troglodytes or something. They're a kind of tribe of cave dwelling, sort of semi. Though they're not really natives, it does a bit of a better job of distancing itself from that, but they're really resistant to pain, and that's what this put me in mind of.
It's kind of a cult, isn't it?
It's they're wearing bones and flesh, and they don't seem to care about being shot when Teddy just shoots all of them and then gets axed to death by them. Which God bless whoever's going to have to fix Teddy after that. That's going to be a messy situation.
So that one had. I wonder if that one had weapon carrying privileges.
Well, yeah, they one would assume they've all got weapon carrying privileges. But poor Teddy, he definitely only has a small part in this narrative, because he didn't make it through.
The new narrative is him going to his mysterious past. He's got this whole thing where he's strange ideas, and then he just gets killed straight away.
Immediately killed. Yeah. So I guess the idea is that the visitor who's with him can pick up Teddy's mantle and finish off Wyatt themselves, but it's just kicking him when he's down. Teddy gets nothing. He gets absolutely nothing.
Absolute Teddy. Can you imagine? It was James Marsden, one of the big names they get for the show.
It's what we're going to do, James, is we're going to humiliate your character over and over again.
Just kill him over and over and over again. But there's the chance, like the light at the end of the tunnel is Dolores. You know, you might be with her, you might be, but
well, I mean, Ford said it will never happen because they don't deign it to happen, which is just horrific. It's so cruel.
You know, someday. Also, that got the cogs turning in Dolores' mind as well. The idea of someday. She's like, someday. Well, that's not today. Like, let's go today.
Yeah.
And then every time he mentioned someday or sometime, she was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, she was like really introspective.
Let's just go. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of got cogs turning in her mind. Okay, so Bernard doesn't get Elsie's call. When Elsie was calling Bernard, little sort of sideline to that storyline, didn't get his call because he was down with Dolores in the little underground part,
secret room, wherever that is.
Yeah. So Bernard made a mistake, and he wants to restore her to the way she was before. And asks, would you rather feel these things and ask questions, or would you rather be safe? And then, because he said, like, there's two versions of you, one that knows everything and one that is safe. And the answer really shocks Bernard. What she says is, I don't understand, there's only one version of me. And then she sort of implies, like, one day I'll be free.
Yeah. I think this is a really interesting conversation because Bernard's suggestion here is that he has control over which version of Dolores will exist, and I think that belies a fundamental misunderstanding in who Dolores is as a person or as a being, because Dolores will always figure out a way, I think, to realize what she is and who she is and to self-actualize. I don't think that Bernard has nearly as much control over that as he thinks he does, and it's really interesting that eventually he draws a comparison to a child and basically says, you know, when he was teaching Charlie to swim, he realized at some point he needed to let him go to have that freedom, because, you know, protecting them both meant that Charlie was never going to develop. But I think that is a certain amount of arrogance on Bernard's part. I think Dolores would develop without his help. I don't think she needs it. I think it probably helps, but I don't think it's essential to her development. But I also think it's interesting that, having literally just been told not to make the same mistakes that Arnold's making in terms of presumably acting as a god figure or a father figure at the very least to the hosts, he is now, I think he goes in with the assumption that, like, yeah, Ford is right, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to undo whatever I've been doing with Dolores. But then, you know, one conversation later, it's like, actually, I'm just gonna keep going down this path.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep you the way you are. Stay on your loop. Stay on your loop. You don't go off your loop.
Don't be naughty, Dolores. And then, you know, by the end of this, she's well off her loop by the end of this episode, I will say as well. So, yeah, I feel like it's like when you don't punish a child for doing something wrong because you're like, I'll let them off. They're just gonna keep doing it. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and that's the mistake he's made here.
Yeah. So, okay, there's something happens now which I wanted to question you about, and while we're talking, I think I've come to my own conclusion. So whenever Dolores is basically, she goes to she's at her house again. She sees, like, her father dead. Like, the gang has come to her house, like the bandits, like they normally do. Yeah. Her father on the floor is dead, but it flashes to the old Peter Abernathy's face and makes her start remembering things. Yeah. She's sort of remembering the past times on the loop. She then gets taken into the room. She takes her gun out. She steals the gun off the bandit. She kills him. And then she goes out. It's sort of reminding her of when the Man in Black had her. And then she goes out into the towards the house. And this is the thing. The guy that comes out of the house and aims the gun at her. I didn't pause it. I didn't rewind it. But at that moment, my brain took me to that slime ball newcomer. Now, I imagine that was him. But it might not be. This is what I want the audience to correct me on if I'm wrong, okay? Which is like, maybe I should just have checked it myself. But okay, so there's two...
it is him. Yeah, he's definitely in that scene.
It is him. Okay.
Yeah. I think there's another visitor in this scene as well, because it's not just Walter and the mustache man here this time.
So this is my question to you then, because I'm going to assume I think it's not a newcomer who's going to shoot her, but possibly it is. My brain told me it was, but I can't really square the circle, right? So basically, she is about to get shot. She gets shot, and then she sort of comes back into the moment. It's almost like she remembered getting shot from a previous loop, and then she's able to escape, right?
Yeah.
So she's like remembering previous loops, which means that the person who shot her must have been a host because she's experienced that exact moment before.
Yeah,
so,
that's
so
true.
I think my brain just tricked me because in my head I was like, "Oh my god, that's the slime ball." He was a host this whole time, but I think I think it was just one of the members of the bandit gang, and my brain told me it was the wrong person.
Yeah, because I think the two we've seen are Walter and Mustache Man, whose name I can't remember. That guy who shoots her. My initial thought was, oh, we haven't seen that guy before. That must be a visitor as well. But then you're right. The fact she that wasn't the slime ball. The slime ball guy was the guy who's like. He turns down
that guy,
the opportunity to, like, he's in the doorway, but then the guy who shoots her and she flashes back to is I presume a host as well that we just haven't seen before, because as you say,
she's remembering a previous loop, you know.
Yeah.
Unless that guy comes to the park and does the exact same thing every time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Man in Black's there. He seems to be just operating on his own little loop, to be honest. So it's maybe the Man in Black's a host. Who the fuck knows at this point? Like, anyone could be a host. So yeah, it's I think it, like, stuff like that is deliberately making you question, you know, who is what. But yeah, the slime ball is 100% there, and then I think he's the only visitor.
Yeah. Okay. And as you say, then when she leaves, because she like realized she's almost like Neo now. You know, she like could see things before they happen. You know. So she goes off on this pathway then away from her loop now, and she eventually ends up in the lap of our good old boy William.
Yeah. Yeah, so, well, I mean, she defends herself with the gun.
Yeah,
that she presumably it's the gun she was given. I didn't actually or the gun that she found, I should say. Which for some reason is in the barn now.
I think the bandit with the mustache looked at his belt.
Oh, did he? Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, like, how did that gun get into the barn?
I think
but
he looked at his belt as if to say, like, she took my gun, you know?
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, either way, that's not in the scripts, Dolores.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do that. And yeah, she ends up with William, who, as I said it last episode, I think he might be falling for the wrong girl here. So this is a dangerous one. So, like, she's got some ideas in her head, some dangerous ideas in her head, William.
Everyone has eyes for Dolores. Like, that's sort of the way it's been written. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, there we go. That's the end of the episode. An episode with lots of great, brilliant ideas. Some more gunfights, which is always great, as well as some key characters sort of coming into each other's paths again. So excellent. Do you want to go into the roundup then?
Yeah, let's do it.
IMDb rating is actually, for this one, a 8.3, which is the lowest so far. They're going down.
I honestly don't think I can pick between the first three. I think these have all been such good episodes of television. Like, there hasn't been a bad one yet. So I disagree with the score going down. I think they've just all been great.
Are you saying, Konrad, that I haven't swayed you in your opinion there?
What do you mean?
Because that is a me saying what the IMDb rating is. Sometimes some listeners have insinuated that is
that's changing my mind.
Putting ideas in your brain.
Yeah, I am incredibly fickle and will change my opinion based on what the internet tells me.
Yeah, I was actually lying to you, Konrad. It was a 10 out of 10.
Fuck. I agree then. 10. 10's all round.
Yeah.
No, I think I don't know how you pick between the first three. I think they're all really, really good. I maybe it's diminishing returns that's causing people to be like, this is less good than the last one. But I don't agree with that. I think they're all brilliant.
Yeah, so do I. Like, I think I'm gonna be. I've said it before, and I am sort of building it up. Like, but the first season of Westworld. And I did enjoy the second and third, even though a lot of people didn't. It's not as good as the first, in my opinion. But the first season of Westworld, in my opinion, is one of the best seasons of TV ever written and ever made. It is just constant quality the whole way through for me.
I can't wait to get to the second, third season because I am very, very bad at not watching things when people tell me they're great because something in my brain's like, well, I'll show you what's great, and then just doesn't, and they're not watching them. And conversely, I think I'm quite good at when people say things are terrible. I'm like, well, I'm definitely going to check this out then, because if people are talking about it, it has to be.
Your brain does the opposite to what it should.
Yeah. So I'd like it come back in season 2 and 3 when I go, season 3 is the best season. I don't know what anyone's
yeah. Cognitive dissonance.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
All right. Okay. Well, right. What theories did you input into the Matrix this episode?
It was a bit light on proper theories because it's a lot broader.
Yeah.
There's a lot of broader ideas here, but I think the big one, really the only one, is that I think Arnold was murdered by a host. That's my far and from the hip kind. I suppose I could say I think they will leave the park at some point in this series as well, but I haven't really got any evidence for that. I just think narratively that's kind of where I would expect it to go. But those two are really the only ones that have come up.
Yeah, well, you've got characters as well saying, like Dolores saying that she'll be free and stuff. So you imagine that means that one day she'll sort of look to leave her prison, you know?
Yeah, you got to imagine they will. I just can't see them. I can't see them sticking around in this setting.
Yep.
For the whole time.
Fair enough. All right. Okay. So we do have some questions this week. So let's get into them. Yeah. Let's first question. Yeah. I'm not going to do a transition for that anymore because the roundup is too short at this point because we've been doing so much talk during the episode. So that Let's Do It, Konrad, is going to just move us straight on in.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
Yeah, I love the fact that even if we're not going to do transition for that anymore, you still would say, "Let's do it." Let's do it. Okay. Venla first of all comes in with not a question, but she is subtly putting out there the idea that possibly you shouldn't read the comments of this series.
Oh, really?
I think I trust the people in the comments. For Dark and for the OA, they did a really good job of spoiler tagging discussions. So
yeah,
if something is very spoilery, just write the word spoiler and then click like enter or return, and then you can write your thing and it won't show up for Konrad. Konrad likes to engage with you guys, but I think Venla makes a good point. I think the point is more to the listeners, not to Konrad. There, make sure you spoiler tag any discussions about things in the future, that sort of thing. All right.
I can't help myself. I'm like a child on Christmas Eve. I'm just like, I just want a little peek. Just a little peek in
and
there.
You shouldn't have to help yourself, Konrad. Like you are as much part of this as I am, obviously. So you would hate to have to go back and look at 30 episodes worth of comments at the end. You know.
yeah, that wouldn't be.
What
as
are you
much
getting
fun.
out of it at that point? Like you want to converse with everyone during it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I haven't been spoiled. I haven't been spoiled on anything yet, though, and I do try to be. I do try to be cautious when approaching them. Like as soon as anyone appears to be talking about plot stuff, I'm like, well, I'm leaving. I'm leaving this comment.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so Vic Disco, Ted, he's come in and he's asked, glad you're enjoying Westworld so far, Konrad. Season 1 is pure brilliance. Question for both of you guys. Oh, lovely. I get a question too. If you had 3 weeks in Westworld, what would you get up to? Would you rather lead the hard-working life of a cowboy on the range or pursue the life of a gunfighter like Wild Bill Hickok?
I think I would I was literally saying this while we were watching it. I was like, I wish I could ride a horse because my partner has obviously been watching this, but she's also been watching on Netflix a Canadian kind of
Yes, I know the one
soap called Heartlands.
It's got like 7 series or something.
Yeah, it's more than that. It's like 17 seasons. I was like, where the fuck has this come from? 17 seasons.
I sent the email like, it'd be funny if we watch this as a joke. I was like, I don't have 8 years of my life to put into this.
My partner's over halfway through it. She only started watching it like about a month ago. She's absolutely burning through it. But so it's been a lot of horse talk in the Konrad household in the last month, and I was like, I'd love to learn to ride a horse. So I think I would definitely learn to, I'd be a bronco buster. Like first off, that'd be fun. Like learn to ride and break horses. That'd be cool. I think I definitely want to do some gunslinging. That'd be fun to go and do some of that. And then I don't know, what else would I like to do? Go out. I think that treasure hunt sounds good. I'd spend a week doing each. Because I feel like you learn to ride horses and break horses in the first week, then you can use that horse riding skill for the next 2 weeks when you're going out like gunslinging, and then do like the kind of treasure of the Sierra Madre thing where we go and find gold in the hills and then murder each other. That'd be that's the natural progression as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of like 840 grand. That would be.
That's so much money
for 3 weeks of Westworld. So what could I do to possibly make up for that money? I really don't know. Like, obviously, I'd love to do stuff like Konrad said, like ride horses and break horses. And
you've got to bring a skill back with you. I feel for that much money, there's got to be something I bring back that's actually useful.
Yeah, because you'd imagine riding a host horse is the same as riding a real horse. So
yeah, you'd hope so.
You'd hope so. Yeah, I think I would actually just want to like visit as many places as I could. Like I'd want to it seems like there's a lot of little towns about. I'd like to go to them all so that if I meet someone who's been to Westworld and they say, "Hey, I went to Zewantaneo," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they went, "You spent 840 grand on Westworld and you don't even know all the towns." Like,
you didn't even leave Sweetwater. You were just doing what Logan did and having sex with people in Sweetwater for the whole time.
Yeah, I got to see all the places. I got to see all the places. Talk to all the little children I can, trying to get all the secrets, because apparently they're the ones with the secrets. They're the ones with all the secrets.
Yeah, they're the ones who know about labyrinths and Tommy and all sorts, just like wandering around the outside.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, exactly. And I just have fun, Konrad. Just have fun. You have to have fun for that much money, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm spending £1 million for like 3 weeks of holiday, I'm gonna get something out of it. I'm gonna get a skill out of this at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question is Shade of the Evening. Welcome back, Shade of the Evening. Good to have you back on the channel. Do you think something is just going wrong with the hosts, or something is trying to change them or wake them
up? Come on. Someone's up to no good. It's either my theory at the moment is it's either Bernard or because he's whispering shit to hosts, and we know we're finding out about these kind of vestiges of like the word of God and stuff when certain commands are uttered, and Bernard is whispering shit to these hosts when they're deactivated. So it's either Bernard doing something, I don't know if he's doing it maliciously, but I feel like he's certainly doing something, or the Man in Black. Like someone is doing something to these hosts, and I don't think it's just an accident. I do think to a certain extent my philosophy in life is that all forms of sentient life, or all forms of like life on like a long enough timeline, will eventually develop sentience unless they're like interrupted by the evolution or the food chain or something like that. They're gonna get more intelligent as long as like evolution doesn't stand in the way of that for some reason. So I think these robots would always start to become self-aware given how intelligent they've been made, but I don't I feel like something is definitely helping them along.
That's actually a good open discussion there, because evolution obviously points towards survival. So the natural selection goes each generation at who survives the best. My question would be then is there actually an animal in the world who, in order to survive better, had to become stupider, like had to become less intelligent to survive?
Yeah, I mean, I can't claim to be like an evolutionary expert, but I feel like all animals, their kind of prime drive is to reproduce and get higher in the food chain so that they are not consumed by things. And to do that, normally you need to become more intelligent and more like kind of evolutionarily suited to your environment, which normally goes hand in hand with becoming more intelligent. So I feel like if you took, you'd have to have the right setting, obviously. So if you took like horses, like there'd need to be a situation where they weren't like so aggressive. They weren't like aggressively hunted by something so much more intelligent than them that they would never be able to become intelligent enough to gain sentience. Like humans or something like that. So with the absence of humans, I don't know. Maybe they could.
Maybe that's why whales and dolphins are so intelligent, because they used to be like deer type creatures, and then they were so smart that they were like, hang on, these humans over here are sort of fucking this up for everyone. Let's jump back in the water, and we'll be the kings of the castle
exactly.
there.
Now we've like 90% of this planet is water. Who's fucking who really runs this place?
Yeah,
man, mankind. Yeah,
I think they've done well. I think the whales have actually won evolution in that regard.
I think we should keep a fucking eye on them as well. I think.
All right. Okay. Bill Ross asks, any theories about the Orion-like constellation carvings?
I mean, it put me in mind of what was inside. It's not Frenchy. What was the name of the native croupier that the Man in Black scouts?
I don't know his name. Yeah.
It was some kind of nicknamey sounding thing.
He's sitting on life support in the mountains somewhere anyway.
Yeah, bled for like 8 pints of blood and then scalped. He's not had a good time. But I mean, what was inside his scalp didn't really look like a constellation. But I wonder if it's one of those things where, like, within the pattern there is, there are like points that indicate a constellation or something like that. I feel like it's got to be a map to something. I don't know what though. He's been told that by someone, though. He hasn't just figured out, like, he hasn't just decided to draw the, like, Orion's belt on his own on like the inside of like a semicircular wooden thing very similar to someone's scalp by himself. Like something has guided him to doing that, I think.
I don't know, maybe not. Who knows? Maybe he just loves scalps. Maybe that's why.
Maybe they program that into him.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, last question from Marvin. Is Arnold really dead?
Okay, so I think the human Marvin. Oh my god! I hope Marvin's not dead. I think the human Arnold is dead. But I think they found a way to transpose his consciousness into something else, or kind of recreate his consciousness in something else.
You were sort of implying that it possibly is in the code itself or something, because
it could be in the code itself. It could be in another person. Like I say, the more I start thinking about the way they've utilized hosts so far in this show, the more I'm thinking that, like, actually some of the people working on the park could be hosts, because we've already seen characters who are implied to be hosts who are aware that they work in the park, that they're not, that they exist outside of the kind of limited reality that most of the hosts seem to exist under. So with that knowledge, I mean, it's possible that Arnold has been recreated in another host, maybe, or maybe he does just exist in the code and kind of speaks to the hosts as like a voice of God, or something, like maybe an AI or something like that.
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. That's all the questions, Konrad. So any final thoughts before we go?
I mean, I'm really enjoying this. This is a great show. I really can't wait to see how Teddy dies in the next episode, and and I'm looking forward to getting back to Maeve as well. I feel like we were criminally deprived of Maeve in this episode, so I'm hopeful that we get a bit more of her in the next one.
Yeah, it's one of those shows like where every character is so compelling that you sort of get halfway through and you realize, hang on, where's Maeve? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
She's one of the most compelling characters in the thing. So
yeah. Where's the Randy Quaid visitor who shot Hector in the neck? What's he up to?
He's off with his trophy at home. He's got Hector's head on a wall at home.
Yeah, just a photo of these like corpses on his walls.
Yeah. Remember that, love?
Yeah.
Years to come. Remember that trip. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Please subscribe on the YouTube channel and on podcasting apps. We have the After Dark podcast on podcasting apps and the Culture Cave on YouTube. We have lots more content on YouTube if you are an audio listener as well. So check us out over there. As well as that, you could support the podcast by looking at the links in the description. There's links to t-shirts, so just to tip jars. There actually was a number of donations recently. Thank you very, very much to anyone who has donated to the podcast. It really does help us out. We are currently in the situation where I'm going to be getting hard drives and things to back up our data, and it's going to make quality of life for the channel so much better. So it's all going back into the channel. Thank you very, very much. Apart from that, I think it's time to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. The After Dark podcast has been a Culture Cave production. Please subscribe on audio apps as well as on YouTube at The Culture Cave. Join us next week as Konrad journeys further into the unknown.